This is the story of how Disney and James Cameron are facing a $500 million lawsuit that is asking a judge to block the release of the next Avatar film just days before it's scheduled to hit theaters. A former 3D animator claims Cameron stole his sci-fi story to create Avatar: The Way of Water, and now he's demanding massive compensation while asking a judge to stop Avatar: Fire and Ash from premiering on December 19, 2025. Eric Ryder filed the copyright infringement lawsuit on December 15, 2025, in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. The defendants include James Cameron, his production company Lightstorm Entertainment, and the Walt Disney Company. And Ryder's lawyers also say the suit names Disney subsidiaries, including 20th Century Studios, and according to Reuters, Ryder wants at least $500 million in damages, and he's asking the court for an order that would block the release of Avatar: Fire and Ash. This isn't Ryder's first rodeo, though, because he sued James Cameron back in 2011 over the first Avatar film and lost when courts found that Cameron had created Avatar independently before Ryder ever submitted his material. What makes this new case different comes down to what Ryder's legal team explicitly states in the filing. This action doesn't attempt to relitigate prior claims, but instead challenges what they call new acts of copying that appear for the first time in Avatar 2. Eric Ryder is a 3D animator, according to the Reuters report and the press release from his law firm Kasowitz. But more than that, he's someone who once worked directly with Cameron's production company. The late 1990s and early 2000s brought Ryder into a collaboration with Lightstorm Entertainment to develop a science fiction project based on his story called KRZ, and the complaint, as described in reporting, alleges Ryder's story took place in the distant future on a moon orbiting a gas giant, featuring anthropomorphic alien beings, a vast ocean world, and a sinister Earth corporation ravaging the environment. Sound familiar? Lightstorm Entertainment spent extensive time developing this project, with Ryder, according to Reuters, working together on it, refining the concepts, exploring every angle of the story. And that's when everything fell apart. The Kasowitz press release says Lightstorm canceled the project and told Ryder that no audience would care for an environmentally themed science fiction film. Picture Eric Ryder's situation for a moment. You've spent time developing this eco-sci-fi story about alien beings on a moon, corporate exploitation tearing apart the environment, and the studio you're working with tells you audiences won't care about it. Then the project gets canceled, and years later, in 2009, James Cameron releases Avatar. Avatar became the highest-grossing film of all time, and the premise featured an Earth-based corporation exploiting a distant moon called Pandora, anthropomorphic alien beings, environmental themes running through every scene, and a hero who goes native with the aliens. Eric Ryder saw those similarities and believed Cameron had used elements from his KRZ story, which led him to file his first lawsuit against Cameron in California State Court in 2011. Legal summaries of that case show that Ryder alleged ideas from KRZ were used in Avatar, including the concept of an Earth corporation exploiting a distant moon and a protagonist who sides with the native population. But here's where things went wrong for Ryder. Because the defendants had a strong defense: independent creation. James Cameron had first conceived Avatar back in 1995, according to the Loeb & Loeb legal summary, and he'd recorded his ideas in a 102-page document called a scriptment, which meant Cameron's work predated Ryder's pitch to Lightstorm by years. A judge granted summary judgment against Ryder in 2013 after finding two key things. Cameron had independently created Avatar before Ryder submitted his material to Lightstorm, and Ryder failed to show substantial similarity between his work and the first Avatar film. An appellate court affirmed that judgment in 2016, ending Ryder's case completely. For most people, that would close the book. You took your shot, you lost, you move on. But something interesting happened after Cameron and Lightstorm won that first case. Cameron and Lightstorm made multiple attempts to acquire the underlying intellectual property rights to Ryder's KRZ story after they prevailed in the first lawsuit, according to the Kasowitz press release. Ryder's lawyers claimed that after the first case ended, the defendants still made multiple attempts to acquire the KRZ rights, and that detail matters because it's part of how the new complaint frames intent. Ryder refused to sell, according to the press release, and that's where the new lawsuit comes in. The press release alleges that after failing to acquire the rights, Cameron and Lightstorm proceeded to appropriate Ryder's protected expression anyway by incorporating it into the sequel. We need to be clear about something here, because these are allegations from the plaintiff's side, while Disney and Cameron have not responded to these claims yet. Reuters reported that Disney and Lightstorm did not immediately respond to requests for comment, which means we're only hearing one side of this story right now. But let's look at what Ryder is specifically claiming about Avatar: The Way of Water. December 16, 2022 brought the release of Avatar: The Way of Water. And according to Box Office Mojo, the film has grossed over $2.3 billion worldwide and ranks as the #3 highest-grossing film of all time. Ryder alleges it was a massive theft of his work on top of being a massive success. Reuters quotes the lawsuit stating that this action is not an attempt to relitigate prior claims, but challenges new acts of copying that occur for the first time in Avatar 2. So what are these new acts of copying? The complaint alleges several similarities between KRZ and The Way of Water, but there's one that stands out as the centerpiece of the lawsuit, and Reuters quotes the filing discussing the harvesting of an animal-based substance that, when refined, can extend human life. Anyone who's seen The Way of Water knows exactly what they're talking about, because the film's plot revolves around hunters extracting a valuable fluid from whale-like creatures called tulkun, and this substance, when processed, can stop human aging while driving the conflict and the villain's motivations throughout the movie. This concept was a foundational element in Ryder's KRZ story, according to the lawsuit reported by Reuters, and the complaint states that while this animal-based, life-extending substance is just one of many examples of infringing content in Avatar 2, its use as a foundational plot device is central. The Kasowitz press release goes further by saying the complaint includes side-by-side charts and comparisons matching Ryder's ideas to elements of The Way of Water, allegedly covering settings, plot devices, imagery, dialogue, and story arcs, while describing the copying as clear, egregious, and intentional. Daniel Saunders, the Kasowitz partner representing Ryder, gave a statement that Reuters and the press release both carried. The defendants alleged misappropriation and downright theft of Mr. Ryder's work to create the third highest-grossing movie of all time is blatant and egregious, and it cries out for compensation. That's strong language. Downright theft, blatant and egregious. Ryder's legal team isn't suggesting maybe there was some unconscious influence or coincidental similarity, but is alleging intentional copying. December 19, 2025 marks the scheduled release of Avatar: Fire and Ash, just days after this lawsuit was filed, and this lawsuit couldn't come at a more critical time for Disney and the Avatar franchise. Ryder isn't just seeking money either, because according to Reuters and the Kasowitz press release, he's seeking compensatory damages in excess of $500 million, plus punitive damages, plus injunctive relief. That injunctive relief is the nuclear option here. Ryder is asking the court to stop further exploitation of The Way of Water and to block the release of future installments, specifically including Fire and Ash, which means he wants a judge to prevent Avatar 3 from coming out. Think about what that means for Disney, because the Avatar franchise is one of the most lucrative properties in film history, with the first Avatar and The Way of Water ranking as the #1 and #3 highest-grossing films worldwide. Disney has invested enormous resources into James Cameron's planned saga of Avatar sequels, with Cameron envisioning 5 films in total and production already completed or underway on multiple installments. A court granting an injunction blocking Fire and Ash would be unprecedented. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in potential lost box office revenue, not to mention the cascading effects on the entire franchise's release schedule, while the marketing machine is already running for Fire and Ash, with tickets on sale and theaters preparing for what they expect to be a massive opening. But here's the reality. No injunction has been granted. Fire and Ash remains scheduled for December 19, 2025 as of the time this lawsuit was reported by Reuters, because the court hasn't stopped anything, and Ryder is asking for this relief. But whether he'll get it is a completely different question. Copyright cases typically take months or years to work through the legal system, and most of the time, movies come out long before any legal resolution. A judge granting a temporary restraining order or preliminary injunction blocking a major film's release would require the plaintiff to meet a very high bar by showing they're likely to succeed on the merits of their case and that they would suffer irreparable harm if the movie comes out. That's a tough standard to meet, especially when the defendants can point to a prior court case where Ryder already lost on similar claims. But the fact that Ryder is even making this request shows how serious he is, because his legal team isn't just going for money but wants to force Disney and Cameron to halt the Avatar machine. Disney and Cameron had not yet publicly commented on the lawsuit, as of the Reuters report published on December 16, 2025, which means we don't have their official response yet. But we can look at the history. Cameron's defense in the first lawsuit was straightforward and effective: independent creation. They showed documentation that Cameron had conceived and developed Avatar back in 1995, years before Ryder's pitch, and that 102-page scriptment from 1995 was key evidence that Cameron's ideas came first. The defense in this new case will point to the fact that Ryder already tried this once and lost, with courts finding no substantial similarity and finding independent creation, raising the question of why this time should be different. They'll argue that the concepts Ryder is claiming aren't protectable because copyright law doesn't protect general ideas or concepts but protects specific expression, and the idea of harvesting something from alien creatures for human benefit is a pretty broad science fiction trope, so even if there are similarities, they're at the level of unprotectable ideas, not specific protected expression. Cameron and his team will fight the injunction request hard by arguing that blocking a major film release days before it's scheduled would cause enormous harm to Disney, to theaters, to everyone involved in the production, and they'll say that monetary damages would be adequate if Ryder somehow wins, so there's no need for an injunction. And they might point out that the timing is suspicious, because why did Ryder wait until days before Fire and Ash is set to release to file this lawsuit when The Way of Water came out in December 2022, which was 3 years ago, and Ryder has had plenty of time to review the film and file a complaint, making the timing right before the next sequel drops look like a pressure tactic. We don't know exactly what Disney and Cameron will say because they haven't filed their response yet, but these are the kinds of arguments you'd expect to see, based on typical copyright defense strategies and the specific circumstances of this case. Hollywood's broader conversation about intellectual property and idea submission includes this lawsuit, and this case is getting attention because it's rare to see a lawsuit ask a court to stop a major film's release right before opening weekend. Because it's rare for a plaintiff to seek to stop a major film's release, and if Ryder's effort gains any traction, it could set a significant precedent. The case also highlights the tricky situation that arises when studios work with outside creators on development deals. Because Ryder pitched his story to Lightstorm, they worked on it together, then they canceled it. And years later, similar concepts appear in Cameron's films. Even if everything was done legally, and Cameron created Avatar independently, you can understand why Ryder feels wronged. James Cameron has dealt with this before, because the research notes that Cameron has dealt with plagiarism claims before, and has successfully fought cases in court in the past. He's a filmmaker who works in science fiction, a genre filled with common tropes and themes like environmental messages, corporate villains, alien worlds, human colonization, going native, and unlikely heroes, all of which are standard science fiction elements that appear in countless stories. Where's the line between common genre elements and specific protected expression? That's what courts have to figure out in any copyright case, and it's not always easy. There are a few key things we should be watching for as this case moves forward. Will the court schedule an emergency hearing to address Ryder's request for an injunction before December 19th? Given that the release date is so close, any decision on blocking the film would have to happen extremely quickly, and so far, based on the available reporting. As of the reporting available right now, nothing public shows an emergency hearing scheduled yet, but that can change fast. But that could change. Watch for Disney and Cameron's official response, because they'll need to file an answer to the complaint, and probably a motion to dismiss or to deny the injunction. And their legal arguments will give us a much fuller picture of the case, and help us understand how strong Ryder's claims actually are. Keep an eye on December 19th itself to see whether Fire and Ash opens as scheduled or whether something happens to delay it, because if the movie comes out without any court intervention, this case shifts to a long-term battle over damages, and the immediate crisis will have passed. Discovery could reveal interesting information about how Avatar 2 was developed if the case goes forward without an injunction, because both sides will exchange evidence and take depositions. And that process could show what materials Cameron and his team reviewed, and whether there's any documentary evidence supporting Ryder's claims. Watch for any settlement discussions too, because major copyright cases often settle before trial when both sides have strong incentives to avoid the uncertainty and expense of litigation. Disney might decide it's worth paying Ryder something to make this go away, even if they think his case is weak. Or Ryder might decide that the risk of losing again isn't worth pursuing to trial. Ryder's history makes this case unusual because he already lost once on similar claims, and courts generally don't look favorably on litigants who keep coming back to fight the same battle. The doctrine of res judicata, or claim preclusion, prevents parties from relitigating claims that have already been decided, and Ryder's legal team is trying to get around this by arguing these are new acts of copying in Avatar 2, not a rehash of the Avatar 1 claims. But the defense could argue there's overlap, and that Ryder is trying to do an end run around the prior judgment. Disney and James Cameron are facing a $500 million lawsuit filed by Eric Ryder, a 3D animator who claims Avatar: The Way of Water copied his science fiction story KRZ. Ryder previously sued over the first Avatar film in 2011 and lost when courts found Cameron had independently created the movie. But now he's back with a new complaint focused specifically on Avatar 2, alleging new acts of copying, including a central plot device about harvesting an animal-based substance that extends human life. December 15, 2025 brought the filing of the lawsuit, just days before Avatar: Fire and Ash is scheduled to hit theaters on December 19th. Ryder isn't just seeking money but is asking for at least $500 million in compensatory damages, plus punitive damages, plus a court order blocking the release of Fire and Ash and stopping further exploitation of The Way of Water. No injunction has been granted as of now. Fire and Ash remains on track for its scheduled release. Disney and Cameron have not publicly responded to the allegations, and the case is just beginning, so we don't yet know how strong Ryder's claims are, or how the court will view his attempt to challenge a franchise he already lost a lawsuit over. Avatar is one of the most successful film franchises in history, with The Way of Water grossing over $2.3 billion worldwide, and the stakes couldn't be higher for both sides. Disney and Cameron face a potential threat to a billion-dollar franchise, just as the next installment is about to premiere. While for Eric Ryder, this is his chance to get compensation for what he sees as the theft of his creative work to make one of the highest-grossing films of all time. The drama isn't just on screen in Pandora, but is playing out in a California federal courtroom, and the outcome could have major implications for the Avatar franchise and for how Hollywood handles intellectual property disputes. Whether the Na'vi fly into theaters on schedule or get grounded by a legal battle remains to be seen, and we'll be watching closely as this case develops, and we'll keep you updated on any major developments. December 19th is still the release date for now, and Avatar: Fire and Ash is moving forward, but this $500 million lawsuit ensures that the conversation around Avatar isn't just about box office numbers and visual effects, but is also about who owns the ideas that make these billion-dollar stories possible.